The transport ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel with a shudder that rattled through the hull. Captain Lee Tae-jin grabbed the overhead rail and steadied himself as the vessel's engines whined down to normal thrust. Through the viewport, the planet Arcturus 7 hung in the darkness like a gray marble, its surface scarred by decades of mining operations. 30 minutes to drop zone, the pilot announced over the intercom. Lee turned to face his team. 7 faces looked back at him, some young and nervous, others weathered and calm. They were Sierra 9, a reconnaissance unit attached to Earth's 3rd Fleet. Their job was simple: get in, gather intelligence, get out. No heroics, no unnecessary risks. Listen up, Lee said, his voice steady and clear. This is a standard survey mission. The mining colony has been abandoned for 3 years. We go in, check for Velkari patrol patterns, take readings, and extract within 48 hours. Keep your heads down and your eyes open. Sergeant Choi Hyun, barely 22 but already a skilled demolitions expert, nodded eagerly. Beside him, Corporal Park Ji-woo adjusted the scope on her sniper rifle, her movements precise and practiced. She had been doing recon work for 5 years and had the calm demeanor of someone who had seen plenty of action. Private Kim Dae-ho sat hunched over his communication equipment, running final diagnostics. The tech specialist never looked completely comfortable unless he had a keyboard or control panel in front of him. Private Yoon Subin, their medic, was reviewing her supplies one last time, her medical bag organized with the care of someone who knew every second counted in a crisis. Lance Corporal Kang Min-seo checked her heavy weapon, a squad automatic weapon that she carried as easily as others might carry a rifle. Private First Class Shin Woo-jin was already in the pilot seat of their drop shuttle, running pre-flight checks. And Private Bae Hansel, their scout, sat perfectly still, eyes closed, mentally preparing for whatever lay ahead. The transport ship entered orbit, and 10 minutes later they were strapped into the drop shuttle. Shin brought them down fast and hard, using the planet's atmosphere to mask their approach. The shuttle touched down in a canyon 5 kilometers from the main mining complex, hidden from any orbital sensors. They moved out in pairs, standard formation for recon work. Lee took point with Bae, while Ji-woo and Min-seo covered the flanks. The mining colony was a sprawl of prefabricated buildings, processing facilities, and tunnel entrances that burrowed deep into the planet's crust. Everything was covered in a fine layer of red dust. The first 6 hours were routine. They swept through empty buildings, documented the layout, and set up sensor equipment to monitor orbital traffic. Dae-ho established a communication relay that would let them transmit data back to the fleet without revealing their position. Then everything changed. "Captain," Ji-woo's voice came through the comm, low and urgent. "You need to see this." Lee and Bae moved quickly to Ji-woo's position on the ridge overlooking the valley. She handed Lee her scope and he pressed it to his eye, adjusting the focus. What he saw made his blood run cold. Ships, hundreds of them. Velkari warships filling the valley beyond the mining complex, parked in neat rows that stretched for kilometers. These were not patrol vessels or scouts. These were capital ships, carriers, and troop transports. This was an invasion fleet. "How many?" Lee asked quietly. "I count 300 minimum," Ji-woo replied. "Maybe more on the far side of that ridge." Lee lowered the scope and keyed his comm. "All units fall back to Rally Point Alpha. Silent running. Move now." They gathered in an abandoned maintenance building and Lee laid out the situation. "This is not a patrol staging area. This is a full invasion force. They're planning to hit human territory, and they're planning to hit it hard. We need to get this information to command immediately," Dae-ho said, already unpacking his equipment. "Do it," Lee ordered. "Everyone else set up a perimeter. If they find us before we transmit, all of this is for nothing." Dae-ho worked fast, his fingers flying over the controls. The transmission would take time to encode and send through the relay network. Time they might not have. 15 minutes into the transmission, Bae's voice crackled over the comm. "Contact. Velkari Patrol. 4 soldiers heading straight for our position." Lee made the decision instantly. "Take them quietly. We cannot let them report back." The team moved like shadows. Ji-woo dropped 2 of the aliens from 200 meters away, her suppressed rifle making barely a whisper. Bae and Hyun took the other 2 in hand-to-hand combat, quick and brutal. It was over in seconds, but Lee knew the patrol would be missed. They would have check-in times, protocols. The clock was ticking. "Dae-ho, how long?" he asked. 10 minutes. Maybe 8 if I cut some redundancy." "Cut it," "We're about to have company." He was right. 20 minutes later, another patrol arrived, this one larger. A dozen Velkari soldiers armed and alert. They found the bodies of their comrades and immediately opened communications. "So much for stealth," Ewan muttered. Lee's mind raced through options. They were 8 soldiers against an army. Running would mean abandoning the relay, and the transmission was not complete. Fighting meant certain death. But if they died and the transmission failed, humanity would not know about the invasion until it was too late. "We hold this position," Lee said. "Whatever it takes, we buy Daeho the time he needs." The team moved into defensive positions. Jiwoo took the high ground in an old crane tower. Minseo and Hyun set up a kill zone at the main entrance. Subin prepared the medical station in the most protected area of the building. Woojin rigged the perimeter with improvised alarms and traps. The Velkari came in force, 50 soldiers advancing in disciplined formation. They clearly expected to find a few scattered survivors or a small militia group. They did not expect trained Earth military personnel. The ambush was devastating. Jiwoo dropped the commanding officer first, throwing the formation into confusion. Hyun detonated charges that collapsed part of the building onto the advancing troops. Minseo opened up with her automatic weapon, raking the exposed flank. Bae struck from an unexpected angle. His knife work silent and deadly. In 3 minutes, half the Velkari force was down. The survivors retreated, dragging their wounded, confusion and fear evident in their disorganized withdrawal. "Transmission complete," Daeho announced. Lee allowed himself one moment of relief. Earth Defense Command now knew about the invasion fleet. The mission was technically complete. They could attempt extraction now, but Lee looked at his team, looked at the equipment they had captured from the Velkari, looked at the defensive position they had established. An idea formed in his mind, crazy and dangerous. "How much time before Earth can respond?" he asked Daeho. "Fleet is 6 days out minimum. More likely 8, Lee nodded slowly. 8 days. The invasion fleet would launch long before then unless something delayed them. Unless something convinced them that this world was not secure, that humans were present in force. New mission, Lee said. We make them think there's an entire company here. We hit them, harass them, make them commit resources. Every day we keep them off balance is another day for our fleet to get into position. Jiwoo looked at him like he was insane. Captain, we're 8 people. 8 people who just took down 50 Velkari with minimal casualties, Lee countered. They don't know how many of us there are. We use that. Hyun grinned. I like it. We're going to die, Jiwoo said flatly. Probably, Lee admitted. But we'll die buying time for billions of people back home. I can live with that trade. One by one, the team nodded their agreement. They were soldiers. This was what they had trained for, what they had sworn to do. Protect humanity, whatever the cost. In orbit above them, War Commander Thelvok of the Velkari Empire received word of the engagement. A minor resistance force on an abandoned world. Annoying, but nothing his forces could not handle. He ordered a company to deal with the problem. 200 warriors prepared to deploy. The Velkari expected to wipe out a small militia in a matter of hours. They had no idea what they were about to face. War Commander Thelvok stood in the command center of his flagship, studying the tactical display with growing irritation. 3 days had passed since he sent a company to eliminate the resistance on Arcturus VII. The company was gone. 200 of his finest warriors, reduced to scattered survivors telling impossible stories. They came from nowhere, one survivor had reported. We would secure an area and then soldiers would appear behind us. We could not pin them down. Every time we advanced, we walked into traps. Thelvok dismissed the warrior with a wave of his hand. Clearly, the initial intelligence was wrong. This was not a small militia. This had to be a prepared military force, perhaps 100 soldiers with proper equipment and training. An insult, certainly, but nothing his empire could not crush. Send a battalion, he ordered. 800 warriors. I want this ended. Down on the planet's surface, Captain Lee Tae-jin watched the new Velkari force deploy through Jiwoo's scope. He could see their confidence in every movement. They believed overwhelming force would solve their problem. They were thinking like an empire that had conquered 17 civilizations. They were not thinking like humans. They learn slow, Jiwoo commented beside him. Good, Lee replied. That gives us an advantage. The team had spent 3 days turning the mining complex into a nightmare for the Velkari. Hyun had rigged every tunnel with explosives, some real and some fake, forcing the enemy to treat every step as potentially deadly. Bae had conducted night raids on their supply lines, stealing equipment and leaving bodies. Jiwoo had picked off officers and specialists from impossible distances, never firing from the same position twice. But the cost was beginning to show. They were exhausted, running on stimulants and sheer determination. Subin had treated dozens of minor injuries and their ammunition was being carefully rationed. Daeho had taken shrapnel to his shoulder during a close call, and although Subin had patched him up, he was operating at reduced capacity. "We can't fight a battalion head-on," Min Seo said, stating the obvious. "We don't fight them head-on," Lee replied. "We make them fight the terrain. We make them fight their own assumptions. We make them fight themselves." The Valkyrie battalion advanced in textbook formation, securing sectors methodically. They were professional, disciplined, and confident. Lee watched them come and smiled grimly. Professional and disciplined meant predictable. The first attack came at night. Bae and Hyun infiltrated the Valkyrie perimeter using stolen uniforms and sabotaged their communications array. For 2 hours, the battalion operated blind, unable to coordinate between units. In that chaos, Jiwoo went to work. She moved through positions like a ghost, firing 3 shots and relocating, always staying ahead of their response. Each shot dropped an officer or a specialist. Command and control began to fracture. Junior warriors found themselves in charge of units they were not prepared to lead. Then Hyun triggered the first of his tunnel traps. 50 Valkyrie soldiers pursuing what they thought was a small team found themselves in a collapsed mine shaft. The survivors clawed their way out hours later, traumatized and shaken. The battalion commander, a veteran named Creval, was beginning to understand he faced something unusual. His warriors were being systematically dismantled by an enemy he could not see, could not predict, and could not corner. He requested aerial support. 3 Valkyrie gunships arrived the next morning, their sensors sweeping the complex for targets. Woo Jin watched them from cover, timing their patrol patterns. He had spent the previous night building something special from mining equipment and captured explosives. When the lead gunship made its third pass over the central facility, Woo Jin triggered his improvised surface-to-air missile. The weapon was crude and should not have worked, but Woo Jin had always been gifted with machinery. The gunship exploded in a ball of fire, crashing into the processing plant. The other 2 gunships pulled back immediately, pilots suddenly aware they were not invincible. The psychological impact was enormous. If humans could bring down their air support with improvised weapons, what else could they do? By the end of the 5th day, the Valkyrie battalion was at 60% strength. Nearly 300 warriors were dead or wounded. Creval sent increasingly desperate reports to War Commander Thelvok. "We are facing a well-equipped force of at least 150 soldiers," he reported. "They have anti-air capabilities, advanced explosives, and sniper teams. They know this terrain perfectly. I need reinforcements." Thelvok stared at the report in disbelief. How could a backwater mining colony host such a force? Where did they come from? This was supposed to be abandoned territory. He pulled up intelligence reports, finding nothing. No records of human military presence. No supply chains. No logical explanation. Unless humans had been planning this. Unless this was a trap. The thought chilled him. If humans had anticipated the invasion, if they had prepared defenses, then the entire operation might be compromised. He ordered 3 more battalions to Arcturus 7th, 2,400 warriors total. He would crush this resistance and prove that human tricks could not stand against Valkyrie might. Lee received the news from Daeho with a mixture of pride and dread. "We got their attention," the captain said. "Now we have to survive it." The team gathered for what might be their last planning session. They looked like soldiers who had been fighting for weeks rather than days. Uniforms torn and stained, faces haggard, hands that trembled slightly from exhaustion and stimulant overuse. But their eyes were still sharp, still focused. "We've bought 3 days," Lee said. "Earth fleet is still 5 days out. We need to hold that long." "We need to change tactics," Jiwoo said. "They will not fall for the same tricks twice. And we are running out of ammunition." "Then we consolidate," Lee decided. "Fall back to the central mining facility. Turn it into a fortress. Make them pay for every meter." They spent the next 12 hours preparing. Woo Jin rigged every approach with sensors and improvised defenses. Hyun placed his remaining explosives at choke points. Min Seo positioned her heavy weapon to cover the main entrance. Jiwoo established overlapping fields of fire from elevated positions. Subin set up a medical station in the deepest, most protected part of the facility. She looked at her dwindling supplies and did not voice what everyone knew. If any of them took a serious wound, there was little she could do. Daeho maintained the communication link to Earth, sending regular updates. His shoulder wound was getting worse despite Subin's care. Infection was setting in, and without proper antibiotics it would continue to deteriorate. But he refused to rest, knowing that link to command was their lifeline. The Valkyrie came at dawn on the 6th day. 2,400 warriors supported by armor and what remained of their air support. They did not advance cautiously this time. They came in a massive wave, determined to overwhelm through sheer numbers. The battle was chaos. Explosions shook the facility. Gunfire echoed through corridors. The humans fought with desperate efficiency. Every shot carefully aimed, every movement calculated. They rotated positions constantly, appearing in unexpected places, creating the illusion of greater numbers. Hyun's explosives devastated the first wave, collapsing an entire section of the facility onto advancing Valkyrie. Minseo's sustained fire cut down warriors as they tried to push through the main entrance. Jiwoo's precision shooting eliminated every officer who tried to organize the assault, but numbers began to tell. The Valkyrie pushed forward through their own casualties, stepping over the bodies of fallen comrades. They were taking horrific losses, but they were making progress. In the communications room, Daeho worked feverishly, maintaining contact with Earth even as the battle raged around him. A Valkyrie breaching team broke through the north wall, heading straight for his position. Daeho grabbed his sidearm, his wounded shoulder screaming in protest. Bae appeared from a side corridor, moving like a shadow. His knife work was brutal and efficient. 5 Valkyrie went down in seconds, but more were coming. "Fall back," Bae ordered. "Cannot," Daeho replied, gesturing to his equipment. "If I disconnect, we lose the link." "Then I stay," Bae said simply, positioning himself between Daeho and the approaching enemy. What happened next would be recorded in the combat logs and studied by military historians for generations. One man with a knife held a corridor against a dozen armored warriors for 4 minutes. 4 minutes that seemed like hours. 4 minutes of brutal close-quarters combat. When Subin reached them, drawn by the sounds of fighting, Bae was still standing. Bodies surrounded him. He was bleeding from a dozen wounds, his knife broken, fighting with his bare hands. Subin pulled him back while Daeho finally grabbed the equipment and ran. As night fell on the 6th day, the Valkyrie pulled back to regroup. They had lost 800 warriors. 800. Against what they still believed was a force of at least 100 humans. In his command ship, War Commander Thelvok reviewed the battle footage. Something was wrong. Very wrong. He kept seeing the same faces. The same 8 faces over and over. But that was impossible. Impossible. War Commander Thelvok had not slept in 2 days. He stood before the tactical display, zooming in on combat footage frame by frame. There, that sniper in the crane tower. He enhanced the image. A human female, distinctive features. Now he scrolled to footage from a raid on the eastern sector. The same face. The same human. 12 hours apart. 5 kilometers of distance, engaging in completely different tactical situations. He called up more footage. The demolition specialist who had collapsed the north tunnel. Young male, barely more than a child by human standards. Now here, in the western ambush. Same face, same soldier. And there again, in the south perimeter breach. "Show me all identified human combatants," he ordered the tactical AI. The display populated with images. His heart sank. 8 faces. Only 8. The same 8 appearing throughout the battle footage. 8 humans had just butchered 800 of his warriors. "This is incorrect," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Run the analysis again." The AI complied. Same result. 8 human soldiers. Confirmed by biometric analysis, facial recognition, and combat pattern matching. 8. Thelvok's subordinate, Sub-Commander Vrelkoth, stood beside him. Perhaps they have reinforced their numbers since the initial engagement? "Show me the most recent footage," Thelvok demanded. The AI displayed video from the last assault, 3 hours ago. 8 humans. Still 8. Moving with exhaustion evident in every step. Uniforms tattered and stained, but still fighting with terrifying efficiency. "They have not been reinforced," Thelvok said slowly. "We have been fighting 8 humans for 6 days. 8 humans have killed over 1,200 of our warriors." The silence in the command center was absolute. Every officer present understood the implications. This was not merely a defeat. This was humiliation. This was a fundamental challenge to everything the Velkari Empire believed about itself. "I will lead the next assault personally," Thelvok announced. "Prepare my personal guard. 1,000 warriors. We will end this." On the planet's surface, Captain Lee Tae-jin gathered his team in what remained of their command post. They looked like they had been through a war, which they had. Subin's medical supplies were gone. Minseo was down to 17 rounds for her heavy weapon. Jiwoo had 2 magazines left for her rifle. Hyun's explosives were exhausted. Bae was barely conscious, propped against a wall, bandaged from shoulder to waist. The corridor fight had cost him dearly. Subin had done what she could. But without proper medical facilities, infection was inevitable. He insisted he could still fight. Lee had not argued. They would all fight until they could not. Daeho was feverish, his shoulder wound turning septic, but his fingers still flew across the keyboard, maintaining their link to Earth. The fleet was 3 days out. "So close, so impossibly far." "Status," Lee said simply. "Communications operational," Daeho reported, his voice hoarse. "But we are down to backup power. Maybe 8 more hours." "Ammunition critical across the board," Jiwoo added. "I am down to hand after my last magazine." "Same," Minseo confirmed. Woojin spoke up. "I can rig some final surprises from what is left. Nothing sophisticated. Just things that go boom." "Do it," Lee ordered. "What about defensive positions?" "We are down to this facility," Hyun said, gesturing to the reinforced structure around them. "Everywhere else is compromised. They know our positions now. No more tricks." Lee looked at each team member in turn. They had accomplished the impossible. 8 people had held off an army for 6 days. They had killed over 1,000 enemy soldiers. They had bought precious time for Earth to respond. But they were at the end. "I am recording a final after-action report," Lee said. "It will transmit on a tight beam to the incoming fleet. If we do not make it, at least command will know what happened here." Nobody spoke. They all knew they would not make it. The only question was how many more Velkari they could take with them. The assault began at dawn. 1,000 Velkari elite warriors, led by War Commander Thelvok himself, advanced on the facility from all sides simultaneously. These were not regular soldiers. These were the personal guard of a war commander, trained from birth for combat, equipped with the best weapons the Empire could provide. They came without hesitation, without fear. They had been told they faced only 8 humans. 8 exhausted, wounded, undersupplied humans. The shame of it drove them forward. How could warriors of the Velkari Empire struggle against such pitiful opposition? The first wave hit Woojin's final traps. Crude explosives rigged to structural supports. Part of the facility's outer wall collapsed, crushing dozens. But the Velkari kept coming. They flowed around the rubble like water, unstoppable. Jiwoo fired her last rounds from the tower. 5 shots, 5 kills. Then she was empty. She slung the rifle and drew her sidearm. 13 rounds. She made everyone count. When the pistol clicked empty, she did not hesitate. She picked up a piece of rebar and prepared to make her final stand. A Velkari warrior crested the tower stairs. Jiwoo swung the improvised weapon with all her strength. The warrior blocked, but the impact drove him back. She pressed forward, using every technique she had learned in hand-to-hand combat training. The warrior was stronger, but she was faster. She was also desperate. The warrior fell. Jiwoo took his weapon and kept fighting. Minseo held the main corridor until her heavy weapon clicked dry. She had maintained a steady rate of fire, forcing the Velkari to take cover to advance slowly. Every second of delay was a second longer the team survived. When the ammunition ran out, she simply picked up the weapon and used it as a club. "Come on then," she screamed at the advancing warriors. "Come and get me." They came. She made them pay for every step. Hyun fought with improvised weapons, throwing anything he could get his hands on. When the Velkari broke through his position, he grabbed a cutting torch from the mining equipment and turned it into a flamethrower. The warriors recoiled from the unexpected attack. Hyun pressed forward, laughing like a madman. "You want some of this?" he shouted. "Come on." "I got plenty." Subin had abandoned her medical station. There was nothing left to treat wounds with anyway. She fought alongside Woojin, both of them using captured Velkari weapons. She had trained as a medic, but she was still a soldier. Her shots were accurate, her movements efficient. Woojin went down taking fire meant for Subin. She dragged him to cover, but she could see he was fading fast. "Stay with me," she ordered. "That is an order, soldier." He smiled weakly. "Yes, ma'am." Then his eyes closed. Bay should not have been fighting at all. His wounds should have left him immobile, but adrenaline and determination kept him moving. He appeared and disappeared like a ghost, his knife finding gaps in Velkari armor. He could not fight long or hard, but he could still hurt them. Daiho refused to leave his post. The communication link was active, transmitting everything. Whatever happened here, Earth would know. He worked the keyboard with one hand, his sidearm in the other. When Velkari warriors broke through to the communications room, he fired until his weapon was empty. Then he stood and faced them unarmed. "For Earth," he said simply. The warriors hesitated. This human was clearly dying, clearly unarmed, clearly no threat, but he stood defiant, refusing to surrender. It confused them. Their commanders had said humans were weak, that they valued their lives above honor. This did not match. Lee found him a moment later, surrounded by bodies. Daiho had fought with his bare hands, with equipment, with anything. He had protected the communication array until his last breath. Lee saluted his fallen comrade and took position over the equipment. The last stand happened in the central command room. 5 humans still standing: Lee, Jiwoo, Minseo, Hyun, and Bae. Subin was unconscious but alive. Woojin and Daiho were gone. They stood back to back, weapons long since empty, fighting with captured gear and improvised clubs. Surrounded by hundreds of Velkari warriors, they refused to surrender. Flood covered them all. They swayed with exhaustion. But they did not stop. Thelvok himself entered the room. He had not personally fought in years, but he was still a warrior. He wanted to see these humans with his own eyes, wanted to understand what drove them. "Surrender," he called out in accented human standard. "You have fought well. You have earned honorable treatment." "No," Lee replied simply. "We are humans. We do not surrender." Thelvok raised his weapon, preparing to give the order to end this. Then the ceiling exploded. Drop pods crashed through the roof. Human Marines, dozens of them firing as they landed. The cavalry had arrived. The rapid response element of Earth's Third Fleet had made a forced approach, burning their engines past safety limits to arrive early. They had monitored Sierra 9's transmissions, had watched the impossible battle unfold. When Daiho's final transmission included the words "Final Stand," the fleet commander had ordered the fastest ships ahead at maximum burn. The Velkari position collapsed into chaos. Fresh human soldiers poured into the facility. The siege was broken. Lee felt hands grabbing him, pulling him toward an evacuation shuttle. He fought weakly, trying to protest. "My team." "We have them, sir," a Marine lieutenant assured him. "All survivors are being evacuated. 5 survivors. Out of 8. Lee let himself be carried away, consciousness fading. They had done it. Against impossible odds, they had held long enough. Behind them, War Commander Thelvok watched the humans escape. Captain Lee Tae-jin woke in the medical bay of the Earth cruiser Indomitable. The room was clean and white, the soft hum of medical equipment a peaceful sound after days of gunfire and explosions. His body ached in places he did not know could ache. Every breath felt like work. A nurse noticed his eyes open and smiled. "Welcome back, Captain. You have been unconscious for 18 hours. "My team," Lee croaked, his throat dry. "Alive, all 5 survivors are stable. You will see them soon. 5 survivors." The words hit him like a physical blow. Woojin was gone. Daiho was gone. Subin had pulled through despite her wounds. Bae was apparently too stubborn to die. The nurse brought him water and told him to rest, but rest was impossible. Admiral Park Hae-won entered 2 hours later. She was a legend in the Earth Defense Forces, a veteran of 3 major campaigns. She pulled up a chair beside his bed and studied him with eyes that had seen too many young soldiers die. "Captain Lee," she said formally, "I have reviewed your after-action reports. All of them, including the final transmission from Private Kim Dae-ho before his death." Lee said nothing. What was there to say? Your mission was to conduct reconnaissance and report back. You were not tasked with engaging the enemy. You were not authorized to conduct defensive operations. You certainly were not ordered to fight a delaying action against a force 300 times your size. "No, ma'am," Lee acknowledged. "I exceeded my authority." "You saved billions of lives," Admiral Park said quietly. "Your intelligence about the invasion fleet allowed us to reposition our forces. We caught them unprepared. The Velkari invasion has been completely disrupted. Their fleet scattered. Their momentum broken. She paused. You and your team did what an entire battalion might not have accomplished. We lost 2 good soldiers, ma'am. You did. And Earth will honor them. But you need to understand what you have done here. The Velkari had never lost to an inferior force. Never. Their entire military doctrine is built on overwhelming strength. You just tore that doctrine to pieces with 8 people. Admiral Park stood. You will be decorated, promoted, and probably asked to train every special forces unit in the fleet. But right now you should rest. And you should know that War Commander Thelvok has requested to meet with you. Lee blinked in surprise. He is a prisoner? He surrendered his command ship without a fight after we broke their fleet formation. Said he needed to understand what happened on Arcturus 7th. I think you broke something in him, Captain. 3 days later, Lee was cleared to walk. His first stop was the medical wing where his team was recovering. Jiwoo was sitting up reading reports on a datapad. She looked up when he entered and nodded. No salute, they were not on duty. Just acknowledgement between soldiers who had survived hell together. Captain, she said. Corporal, he replied. How are you feeling? Like I got hit by a transport ship. But I will live. Bay is down the hall. They say he should not be alive, but I think he just forgot to die. Lee found Bay asleep, covered in bandages and connected to various machines. His vitals were stable, though, and the doctors were optimistic. Zubin was in the next room, already pestering the medical staff about returning to duty. Minacio was in physical therapy, working to rebuild strength lost during the siege. Hyun found Lee in the corridor. The young sergeant looked older now, aged by the experience. They want me to teach a class on improvised explosives, he said. I told them I mostly just blew stuff up and hoped it worked. You did more than that, Lee said. You held off an army. We all did, Hyun corrected. Together. The meeting with Thelvok was arranged for the following day. Lee entered the interrogation room to find the Velkari commander seated at a table. Without his armor, Thelvok looked smaller, less imposing, but his eyes were intelligent, watchful. Admiral Park was present, along with several intelligence officers. The room was being recorded from multiple angles. Captain Lee Tae-jin, Thelvok said in perfect human standard, I have been learning about you. 8 soldiers. My analysts confirmed it again and again. 8 humans held off my forces for 6 days. Yes, Lee confirmed simply. How? Thelvok leaned forward. We had numbers. We had armor. We had air support. We had every advantage. You had advantages, Lee agreed. But you were predictable. Your tactics never changed. You advanced in formation, secured sectors methodically, relied on overwhelming force. We knew what you would do before you did it. We are trained warriors. We follow proven doctrine. Exactly, Lee said. Your doctrine does not account for an enemy that refuses to fight on your terms. We did not try to match your strength. We exploited your weaknesses. Your rigid command structure meant that when we killed officers, your units fell into confusion. Your reliance on technology meant that when we disrupted communications, you could not coordinate. Your numerical advantage meant nothing in the mining tunnels where only a few could advance at once. Thelvok absorbed this, but surely you knew you would die. Why did you not retreat? Retreating meant abandoning the mission. The mission was more important than our lives. You would die for your mission? Thelvok seemed genuinely confused. We are soldiers, Lee replied. Dying for the mission is the job. We all accepted that when we enlisted. What matters is that the mission succeeds. Admiral Park spoke up. Commander Thelvok, what Captain Lee is not saying is that human military doctrine emphasizes individual initiative, adaptation, and mission focus. We train our soldiers to think, not just follow orders, to improvise when plans fail, to find advantages where none seem to exist. Thelvok was quiet for a long moment. I have commanded warriors for 30 years. I have conquered worlds, but I have never seen soldiers like yours. They did not fight with honor or glory. They fought with desperation and cleverness, like cornered animals, but animals that think. We fought like humans, Lee corrected. We do what we must to survive, and we do not give up, ever. The interrogation continued for hours. Thelvok wanted to understand every tactical decision, every ambush, every improvised weapon. He took notes, asked questions, challenged assumptions. It was clear he was trying to rebuild his entire understanding of warfare. Finally, Admiral Park called an end to the session. As guards led Thelvok away, he paused at the door. "Captain Lee," he said, "I was taught that the Velkari Empire was invincible, that we were the greatest warriors in the galaxy. You and 7 others proved that wrong. I do not know if I should hate you or thank you." "You do not need to do either," Lee replied. "You just need to remember. Remember that numbers are not everything, that technology is not everything, that even a small force properly motivated and properly led can achieve the impossible." After Thelvok left, Admiral Park turned to Lee. "He's going to write a book about this, you know. The Velkari take their military history seriously. This will change how they think about warfare." "Good," Lee said. "Maybe next time they will think twice before invading." "Maybe," Admiral Park agreed. "But you should know this is causing ripples throughout the galaxy. Every species that serves under the Velkari, every client state, every tributary world, they all heard what happened. 8 humans held off the Velkari Empire. People are starting to ask questions about Velkari invincibility." "That was not our intention," Lee said. "Intentions do not matter. Results do. You just started something, Captain. The Velkari client worlds are restless. There have been 3 uprisings in the past week. Small ones, but growing. Your actions inspired them." Lee had not considered that. They had been focused on survival, on delaying the invasion. They had not thought about the larger implications. "The galaxy is changing," Admiral Park continued. "Humanity is no longer seen as weak. We are seen as dangerous. And you, Captain, you and your team are the face of that change." A week later, the team was reunited for a memorial service for Wu Jin and Daeho. Their bodies had been recovered from Arcturus 7 and would be returned to Earth for burial with full military honors. The survivors stood in dress uniforms, medals they had not asked for heavy on their chests. Lee gave the eulogy. He spoke of courage, of sacrifice, of duty. He spoke of 2 soldiers who did their jobs until the very end, who died protecting their comrades and their mission. He did not speak of glory or heroism. Wu Jin and Daeho had been soldiers, and soldiers did not need flowery words. After the service, the team stood together in silence. They would be going separate ways soon. Ji-Woo had been offered a position training snipers. Hyun was being assigned to special weapons development. Bae, once he recovered, would be teaching infiltration techniques. Minseo was requested by 3 different units. Subin would continue as a combat medic because, as she said, someone needed to keep soldiers alive. Lee himself was being promoted to major and given command of a new reconnaissance unit. They would all serve again in different ways, but they would carry Arcturus 7 with them forever. "We did good," Hyun said quietly. "We did what was necessary," Ji-Woo corrected. "Same thing," Bae added. Lee looked at his team, these people who had faced impossible odds and survived. "We showed them what humans can do. That is enough." 6 months had passed since the Battle of Arcturus 7. The galaxy had changed in ways no one predicted. The Velkari Empire, which had stood unchallenged for 1,000 years, was now facing internal collapse. 3 client species had declared independence. 4 tributary worlds had stopped paying tribute. The carefully constructed hierarchy of the empire was falling apart, and it all traced back to a single recon mission. Major Lee Tae-jin sat in his new office at Earth Defense Command headquarters, reviewing reports from across human space. His promotion had come with a desk job he did not want but understood was necessary. Someone needed to analyze what happened on Arcturus 7 and turn those lessons into doctrine. That someone was him. The door chimed. "Come in," he called. Admiral Park entered, carrying a datapad. "We have a situation," she said without preamble. "The Velkari Empire has requested formal negotiations. They want to discuss what they call adjusted relations with humanity." Lee raised an eyebrow. "They want peace?" "They want to not fight us again," Admiral Park corrected. Apparently, Thelvok's reports have caused quite a stir in their high command. They are reevaluating their entire approach to warfare. Several of their senior commanders have requested access to our military training materials. Will we provide them? That is above my rank to decide. But it shows how thoroughly you rattled them. She handed him the datapad. "This is the casualty report from Arcturus 7, final numbers." Lee looked at the screen. 1,400 Velkari casualties. 8 humans deployed, 2 killed in action. The ratio was stark, undeniable, and terrifying to anyone who thought about it carefully. "There is more," Admiral Park continued. "Thelvok has written a book. It is being translated into human standard now. The title roughly translates to The Human Way, Lessons in Adaptation and Survival. It is required reading for all Velkari military officers. He dedicated it to Private Kim Dae-ho and Private First Class Shin Woo-jin. Lee felt a lump in his throat. He honored our dead? He did more than that. He is calling for fundamental reforms in Velkari military training. Emphasis on individual initiative, adaptive tactics, and understanding enemy psychology. Everything we take for granted in our training, they are having to learn from scratch. Good, Lee said quietly. Maybe the galaxy will be a little more peaceful if everyone stops assuming strength is just about numbers. Admiral Park sat down. You know the rest of your team is making waves too? Corporal Park Ji-woo set new records in the sniper training program. Sergeant Choi Hyun's improvised explosive techniques are now part of standard Special Forces curriculum. Lance Corporal Kang Min Seo has 3 different units fighting over who gets her as an instructor. They were always exceptional, Lee said. Arcturus just gave them a chance to prove it. And Private Bae Hansol has recovered enough to return to duty. He is being assigned to your new unit, actually. Said he would not work for anyone else. Lee smiled. That sounded like Bae, stubborn to the end. Across the galaxy in the capital of the Velkari Empire, War Commander Thelvok stood before the Council of War. These were the highest military authorities in the Empire, commanders who had led campaigns across dozens of worlds. They listened as he presented his findings from Arcturus 7. We have been wrong, Thelvok said bluntly. Our doctrine, our training, our entire military philosophy is built on assumptions that no longer hold. The humans have proven that technology and numbers can be overcome by superior tactics and determination. One of the elder commanders bristled. You were defeated by primitives. This does not mean our entire system is flawed. With respect, Elder Commander, the humans are not primitives. They are perhaps the most militarily advanced species we have encountered, not in technology but in application. They train every soldier to think like a commander. They encourage improvisation. They reward creativity in combat. We do none of these things. We have conquered 17 civilizations with our methods, another commander argued, and we have just lost 3 client species because those civilizations saw that we are not invincible, Thelvok countered. 8 humans held off our forces for 6 days. 8. If humans decided to go to war with us, truly war, what would happen? They have billions of soldiers. If even a fraction of them are as capable as the ones I faced, we could not win. The silence that followed was heavy. No one wanted to admit it, but they all knew Thelvok was right. The battle reports were clear. The evidence was undeniable. 8 humans had done what should have been impossible. What do you propose? The Supreme Commander asked. Reform. Total reform of our military training. We must teach our warriors to think, not just obey. We must emphasize adaptation over doctrine, and we must never underestimate an opponent again, regardless of their numbers. The council debated for hours. In the end, they approved Thelvok's proposals. The Velkari Empire would change, or it would fall. Those were the only options. On Earth, in a cemetery overlooking the ocean, 2 fresh graves bore the names of Shin Woo-jin and Kim Dae-ho. Their headstones were simple, marking them as soldiers of Earth Defense Forces, killed in action at Arcturus VII. But beside the official markers, visitors had left tributes. Flowers, notes, small tokens of respect. One note read, You showed the galaxy what humans can do. Rest well, soldiers. Another said, 8 against thousands. You made us proud. Lee visited the graves regularly when he was on Earth. He would stand in silence, remembering his team members, remembering their sacrifice. Subin had come with him once, placing flowers and crying quietly. They did not speak. Words were not needed. 1 year after the battle, Earth Defense Command held a formal ceremony. Sierra 9 was awarded the Terran Star, the highest military decoration Earth could bestow. The 5 survivors stood at attention as Admiral Park pinned medals to their uniforms. 2 medals were presented posthumously to the families of Woo-jin and Dae-ho. The ceremony was broadcast across human space and beyond. Billions watched as 8 ordinary soldiers were recognized for extraordinary courage. But Lee knew they were not heroes in the traditional sense. They had simply been soldiers doing their jobs under impossible circumstances. That was what made it meaningful. After the ceremony, a journalist asked Lee if he had any message for the people of Earth. Just this, Lee replied. We are all capable of more than we think. When pushed to the edge, humans do not break. We adapt, we overcome, we survive. That is not special. That is just what we do. The interview was played across the galaxy. Species who had dismissed humanity as weak began to reconsider. The Velkari had learned this lesson at great cost. Others were taking note. 2 years after Arcturus 7, Major Lee commanded his own reconnaissance unit. They were conducting exercises in a remote system when they encountered a Velkari patrol. Both sides tensed, weapons ready. But the Velkari commander hailed them on an open channel. "Major Lee Tae-jin?" the Velkari asked. "Yes," Lee confirmed, wary. "I am Commander Vekron. I studied under War Commander Thelvok. I read his book about you and your team. It is an honor to encounter you." Lee relaxed slightly. "No hostilities?" "No hostilities," Vekron confirmed. "My orders are clear. Avoid conflict with human forces unless absolutely necessary. My commanders believe starting a war with your species would be inadvisable." "Smart commanders," Lee said. "We learned from you, Major, the hard way. But we learned." Vekron paused. "Your 2 soldiers who died, Shin Woo-jin and Kim Dae-ho. They are honored in our military academies as examples of dedication to duty. I wanted you to know that." Lee felt emotion rise in his throat. "Thank you, Commander. That means more than you know." The 2 ships parted peacefully. It was a small moment, but it represented something larger. The galaxy was changing. Old assumptions about military power were being questioned. Humanity was no longer an unknown quantity. 5 years after the battle, Lee retired from active duty. He was only in his mid-30s, but 5 years of war had aged him. He took a position as an instructor at Earth's premier military academy, teaching tactics and strategy. His class on asymmetric warfare was always oversubscribed. On the first day of each semester, Lee would tell his students about Arcturus 7. Not to glorify war, but to teach them what soldiers could accomplish when properly trained and properly motivated. He would show them the combat footage, walk them through each decision, explain the reasoning behind every tactic. "You are not learning this to become heroes," he would say. "You are learning this because someday you might face impossible odds. And when that day comes, I want you to remember that 8 people once held off an army, not because they were special, but because they were prepared, adaptable, and absolutely refused to give up." The students would listen, transfixed. Many would go on to distinguished military careers. Some would face their own impossible situations and would remember Major Lee's lessons. The legacy of Sierra 9 continued. 10 years after the battle, Ji Woo-hyun, Bae Soo-bin, and Min Seo reunited at Lee's home. They were older now, scattered across human space in various assignments. But once a year they came together to remember. They sat on Lee's porch, drinking and talking late into the night. They spoke of their lives, their families, their careers. But eventually, as it always did, the conversation turned to Arcturus 7. "Do you think we changed the galaxy?" Hyun asked.